Latina Leadership Podcast, the podcast made for Latinas by Latinas. Get comfortable, amiga, and enjoy the conversations.
Hola, and welcome to another episode of the Latina Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Anjelica Gonzalez, and on today's episode, we have an amazing guest, Giovanna. Giovanna, Gigi, right?
Yeah, whatever's easiest. Yeah, Gigi, Giovanna, Gio, G-Money.
G-Money. Oh, okay. I always give the opportunity for the guests to introduce themselves to the audience. So please go right ahead to share what you would like to share with us.
Thanks, Anjelica, and thank you for having me on the show. For those that don't know me, my name is Giovanna Gonzalez, but a lot of people know me as Gigi or the First Gen Mentor. I'm a former investment professional turned Tik-Toker, financial educator, speaker, and author of the best-selling book, Cultura and Cash.
So you, background really quick, because you went over that really fast. Where did you start?
I have a traditional corporate background. I worked 10 years in financial services, but about 3 years ago, I quit my corporate career to be a creative entrepreneur as a TikToker and a public speaker, and now a published author.
Okay, so I'm assuming, I know actually, it's still in finance. It's still in the financial conversation. You have a best book also. So what you teach on the TikTok, is it the same thing that's in the book?
Yeah, so my TikTok account focuses on money and career tips for first generation Americans or other women of color. The book is specifically money tips. Maybe book number 2 will focus on the career tips that I also share on my socials.
So as you know, there's a lot of disconnects when it comes to culture and money. You know that because you speak about it often, and you were within that sector, right? It was something that you were teaching. Well, hold on. I know you said corporate. So were you a banker, or were you working within a bank, or were you working within a financial institution?
No, I was working at a large financial institution. Its name was Northern Trust. I worked in investment management, where I did investment performance reporting. So I wasn't dealing directly with clients. My role was to generate investment performance reports for our large institutional clients. We serve public pension funds, endowments, foundations, big money. So I would report on how their portfolio was doing for the week, for the month, the whatever period the consultants needed the information for. And they would use my reports and my data to then make their investment recommendations to the large institutional clients.
How did you end up in that? How did you end up there? Why financial? Was it something that you were interested in, or you really just good at numbers?
As a young student, I was always good with math. Yes, I knew that I wanted to work with money in some capacity. I just didn't have a lot of exposure as the daughter of Mexican immigrants into that sort of career. I knew accounting could be a possible track. I didn't really know what other sort of careers existed outside of that. When I was in college, I did intern for a financial planner, and I really liked that kind of work. But ultimately, my first job straight out of college, it was still working with money, but not in a way I had envisioned. I worked for an auto insurance company processing auto claims. So when people had a total loss or they had to have their car fixed, I would be the one that would ask them all the questions about how the car accident happened and issue payment to the shop or issue payment to the customer for their total loss. I did that job only for about 3.5 years. I switched because I didn't feel professionally fulfilled. I didn't feel that I was putting my economics degree to use. So I pivoted to the investment consulting space, and that's where I spent the majority of my career.
Okay. So then leading into the conversation within finance, because this is where we want to get to. We want to get to the nitty gritty. You understand now finances, you understand, especially, oh my God, the fact that you understand insurance, right, is already a big deal. But so understanding what it is that you needed, everybody's scared of credit. Everybody's scared to talk with numbers. Everybody's afraid to, right? There's not much of a boast to say, yeah, it looks pretty, right? We know what cars cost money. We know what things cost. But to be able to attain them, or to be able to, money is just such a big stigma, and let's be honest, around the culture. We don't really like to talk about it in terms of like, we don't even like to talk about like health insurance or like life insurance or anything like that, right? And that's always a difficult topic to have within ourselves. So why did you leave your corporate job? And I know you said that you weren't making the impact that you thought you were, but why did you leave the corporate job and specifically go this route as an influencer down to the TikTok road and then writing the book?
Yeah. The reason I quit my corporate job to be a creative entrepreneur was because during the last few years of my corporate career, I developed a passion for financial literacy. And this passion came about from my own lived experiences. I had a lot of challenges as a young adult in my 20s. I really struggled with a lot of bad situations that I couldn't escape out of because I didn't have enough money or rich parents to bail me out. So, for example, I had a nightmare Craigslist roommate that I was needing to leave immediately, but I couldn't get out of there because I didn't have enough money for a deposit for the new place. I was stuck in a toxic workplace where I was working till 2 a.m. on a Friday. But again, I couldn't quit or lay boundaries with my boss because I was in fear that I would get fired. Had I had some sort of savings put aside, I would have been able to feel empowered to say no and take care of myself. So after a variety of those types of situations, I said, okay, enough is enough. I did not go to college and do all this for me to still be struggling with money. Why is it that I'm struggling with money? And I had that moment where I realized it's because nobody ever teaches us how money works. We don't get taught in school. And if you have immigrant parents like I do, you probably weren't taught it at home either because our parents are just trying to survive in a new country. That's the last thing on their mind. So I decided to go on a journey of self-educating. I read over 50 personal finance books and felt that I mastered the language of money. And once I had the tools to execute my own financial plan, I started setting up all my ducks in a row. But I also was impassioned with, this is so unfair that not everybody has access to this information, and money affects us all. So if we don't know how to manage it well, it's going to impact our life negatively, like how it had already impacted me. So I looked into ways to sharing my new knowledge with my community. And I found a nonprofit called the YWCA, where they were accepting applications for volunteer financial educators. All that they required was that you worked in finance, and which I did at the point, investment management. So I did that for about almost 2 years on the side. It was a fun hobby where I still had my 9 to 5, and in my free time, I would volunteer with the YWCA and teach a budgeting 101 or an investing 101 class with them.
So do you find it different when you teach? Like you obviously digest information a little bit differently, right? Because you were in that space, you're in that corporate space, so you understand some of the terminology, you understand what it means to make up stuff here. I honestly don't even understand myself, but you understand like what it takes for those who don't understand money or don't understand like the financial side of things. Is it different to teach than what you learned, or do you know what they need?
Yes, because what I learned from these money authors that spoke in a lot of financial jargon. There's a lot of jargon when it comes to learning finances. There's terms like APR, FICO credit score, all these it really is like learning a new language. So I had to kind of go through it to learn it. But I know that when writing this book or when teaching it in live workshops, it would be a disservice to my audience to speak in those same terms, because I understand that the terms can feel intimidating. And when somebody feels intimidated by a subject, they kind of avoid it. They're not looking to really lean in and learn more. So I take a lot of pride, and that's why I've been successful on TikTok and now with the book, in teaching financial education jargon free, without the finance bro jargon, is what I say. So I challenge myself to explain things in layman's terms, to use analogies so that I don't have to use these fancy words that the finance world uses sometimes to kind of gatekeep this information from us.
No, they definitely do. I myself am not very financially literate a lot of the times. I'm trying my hardest to be able to do it, right? APR, right? What it is, the interest rate of something, to be able to do what we want to do in a way that's going to be less impactful for us, and not try to gain so much debt that we're going to pay so much interest on whatever it is that we're doing. It's a whole conversation outside of this, right? It's an entire, like, you can go down the path, like you can go down 2 years of learning, but you still haven't learned enough, right? There's still so much more impact, like that personal economics, community economics, and then universal economics. It's a whole other industry. It's a whole other place to be. So when you talk about who is that you're trying to impact when you're on TikTok?
My audience is a first generation Latina, likely the first in their family to graduate from college. likely the first in our family to have an office corporate job, somebody that's concerned about not just their finances, but also the finances of their extended family. A lot of them feel like they're their parents' retirement plan, or they have to provide some sort of financial support while really building from nothing, because we don't get generational wealth. So that's who I wrote the book for, and that's who the majority of my audience is on socials.
Have you seen the impact of what you've done here?
I have. The book was released in January, and it'll be 2 months on the 23rd since it's been released, and it already has over 100 5-star reviews on Amazon. For context,
Amazing.
Thank you. For context, for anybody that's not familiar with the publishing or the book world, a book is considered successful if it has 20 reviews within the first 2 months it's launched. So the fact that I have 5 times that, and they're excellent, long reviews. I actually have them on my wall because my therapist encouraged me to have them visible. I knew the book would make an impact because I wrote the book for the younger version of myself, for what I needed to hear when I was in my mid-20s. I'm now in my mid-30s. But to actually have real readers read it and to get a lot of value from it, and to meet me at my book tour stops and tell me that the book has changed their life, or to leave me reviews and share it on stories about how impactful it's been, it's really, really special.
That's amazing. So sometimes we don't feel the direct impact. Yes, they love to tell the stories, but do you feel the direct impact that you've made within your family, within like the close-knit community that you hold close?
It's been harder with my family, especially my dad. My dad is still resistant to trusting financial institutions, so I cannot get him to put his cash savings in a bank. He still has them underneath the mattress. And I understand why my dad mistrusts banks, because he comes from Mexico, and Mexican banks have screwed him over. So he feels that the same situation will happen to him in the US. And I've explained to him that it's a lot more regulated. There's the FDIC insurance, but he's just like, no, I'll keep my money where I can see it. And I know it's there. I have made progress with my mom. My mom works at Dick's Sporting Goods, and she was offered workplace benefits like a 401k and life insurance. And her then husband wasn't well. He had some health issues, and I encouraged her to sign up for the life insurance, the spousal life insurance. I believe it was like $3 a month, or $3 per paycheck, right? It's a very small amount. And I said, hey, because he does have that illness, I would sign up for it. And she listened, and he passed away, unfortunately. And she got a small settlement. It wasn't big. It was, I believe, $30,000. But again, that's something that she would have skipped if I hadn't taken the time to sit down with her and review her benefits with her.
That's a huge impact. That's what 30,000 can do. So that's even when somebody doesn't have life insurance, or they didn't save the money to. My mom's way of saving money is like just keeping everything completely like in the bank. She wants to visit them, and she wants to like print out and items, things like that. And so she took the time to actually buy her plot. Like it's very small steps that my mom has taken. But she really did take risks in like getting loans and then giving out loans herself with some of the money that she saved, and getting small percentage of interest rate on the money she lent out to somebody who wanted to buy a house, and they like slowly but surely gave the money back with a little bit of interest rate. It wasn't a lot. So I think, and this is convincing my mom that she has opportunity to be able to do that. But when it comes to large institutions and large places, to be like, when does that shift? When do we say not that this information is not important to our like community, but how do you decide which information like pertains to us or can be useful to us?
Yeah, I think what you're asking is, what's a way to get a family member who's resistant to moving differently with their money? It sounds like your mom just kind of keeps it in the bank when it's okay to keep some money in the bank, but after a certain amount, it needs to be invested so that it grows. I'm assuming your mother doesn't invest in the stock market.
No, she definitely doesn't invest in much of anything. She just knows that a lot of what investment looks like to us, and I think you can attest to this, is real estate. It's just buying homes. It's buying dirt, basically, right? Buying a house that's in the neighborhood, and hopefully it goes up, and that's it. They come with the same traditions that they come in Mexico, right? Is having tierra, having land.
Right, right. And I actually addressed that in the book because I've actually been discouraged from my dad to not invest in the stock market. He's just like, I don't understand how it works. Why don't you just buy a couple properties?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that they gravitate towards properties is because a home is tangible, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
see it, you can feel it, where the stock market is not, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that just means we're missing education on what the stock market is. So I've taken the time to explain to my dad how the stock market works. You're essentially investing in companies and in hoping that they will grow and profit so that you can get more money out of it. There are different ways to make investments. So it's not just in the stock market. Like you mentioned, you can also acquire a real estate portfolio, right? You can acquire several
Mm-hmm.
properties and that way you can rent them out, get some cash flow, sell them out, flip them, right? That's one way to invest. Another way to invest is by investing in a business, right? If you create a product, something that you can eventually sell off to somebody else, that's an investment if you built it from nothing. And the other way, the easiest way, I argue, for first generation Americans like myself would be investing in the stock market. And that's because it has the lowest barrier to entry. For real estate, you're going to need some sort of large down payment. For depending on the type of business, you might need to take out business loans, where with the stock market investing, you can get started with something as low as $20 a month to get
Mm-hmm.
started investing. And what I would suggest, if maybe your mom is a little apprehensive about stock market investing, is I love to show in workshops the power of compound interest, right? Because they're like, okay, the stock market, what exposure do we really have to the stock market? Maybe from the movies, like The Wolf of Wall
Mm-hmm.
Street, like
Yeah, that's it.
and they're bad representations of what the stock market is because they're very extreme stories and it's
Mm-hmm.
usually corrupt stories. And we're like, oh, well, that's not for us. But if your mom has a 401k or has ever had one, she's a stock market investor because that's what a 401k does. It invests in the stock market. If a janitor for a school system has a 403b, they're also an investor because, again, a
Mm-hmm.
403b invests in the stock market. Sometimes we think that to be a stock market investor, we have to be actively trading stocks and reading financial journals and being in front of big Bloomberg terminals looking at charts. That's one kind of investing. That's day trading, and it's very intense. And only a very small amount of people are actually successful at it. But the majority of us can invest into what are called mutual funds or EFTs, which are kind of like a basket of companies. For example, like the funds that I'm invested in, they have a little piece of Apple, Walmart, Coca-Cola, a little bit of all, so that I'm kind of riding the wave of the stock market as the stock market increases.
Okay, I just learned a whole lot right now.
Yeah. So are you familiar with the concept of compound interest?
No, I was gonna ask you that. I'd never heard of that.
Yeah. So compound interest is when your money makes money. Albert Einstein has a very famous quote that he says, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world.
Uh-huh.
And he says, he who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. So in the same way that if you have a credit card and you charge your credit card, let's say $1,000 for some big purchase, and you make the minimum payment of maybe $50, then you get charged interest, right? Because you didn't pay the whole thing. So you're paying compound interest, where if you invest, you put the money in the stock market, it'll grow over time. At least that's the goal, that it'll grow over time. So your money, let's say over the history of the stock market has grown by 10% every year. That's some years is negative 30, some years is positive 30, but on average is 10%. So again, if your money starts here, but as you leave it and there in the long term, it slowly grows over time. But it can only grow if you put it in the stock market. If you put it in a bank, it just stays flat. Maybe you get a little bit of interest, so it kind of stays right here. But guess what? Inflation outpaces that, and it eats those small earnings. So by you keeping your money at a bank, it's not keeping up with the high cost of living with inflation, where the stock market, because you're assuming it's going up, you are able to outpace inflation and then some. For example, let me give you an example. I have a real example from my book.
Yeah.
I have this example of how my parents spent $15,000 on my quinceañera. They didn't have the money for it. They charged it on a credit card. And I was their only daughter, so of course they were happy to do that for me. But in the book, I make an argument that I wish my parents had instead been more money savvy and had a smaller party for me. I say if they would have had a $5,000 quinceañera, it's still enough money to acknowledge the milestone and celebrate and build memories, right? And if they would have put the other $10,000 in the stock market, over 30 years, it's projected that those $10,000 would have grown to almost $100,000 in 30 years, right? And I say, you know, I'm very thankful that my family took the time to celebrate me. I have so many good memories of my quinceañera, but I don't have $100,000 worth of good memories, you know, and that was what it cost them. That's what it cost my family. So yeah, it's important to understand like how money could grow. And that's what white people do, right? White people understand the stock market. They take advantage of it. Because my brother has that fear when I talk to him about investing. He's like, well, what if I lose it? And I told him, Carlos, if the stock market was just a losing game, do you think rich white people would bother with it? No, rich white people want to keep their money, right? So they have financial advisors and consultants that are telling them you've got to invest in the stock market to make your money grow. And again, if you don't feel comfortable with the stock market because you don't understand it enough or you're still learning, there's different ways to build wealth, like by getting properties, real estate, or by building a business. I'm going to send you a signed copy here. I'm going to send you a link because I think my book is very beginner friendly. And if you check out the reviews too, you'll see how everybody's like this. I'm always intimidated by finance books, but this book was written by like my cool older prima that was just kind of giving me, yeah. So, and that's very much the goal. I wanted it to be practical and relatable and approachable. I didn't want to intimidate my reader, and I think that I accomplished just that.
This is like invaluable information. The fact that you can explain it to, especially to somebody like me, who does like understand some financial literacy, right? But none of what you're like speaking of at all. Actually, it's kind of embarrassing to like say that. It's like I thought I was like a little bit more savvy. I thought I was a little bit more intellectual in terms of like our finances, right? All I ever do and what I've been focused on and working on is, okay, Anjelica, your credit score, your credit score, your credit score, your credit score.
And that's important.
Yeah, it is important.
Credit is important. Yeah. That's still a win, but yeah, what I focus on in my book are 5 important pillars. I call them the first gen 5. And I focus on these 5 because I know there's a lot to cover in the money space. There's crypto, insurance, real estate, and I didn't want to overwhelm my reader. So I thought, what are a few things I can focus on that really will make an impact to somebody when they finish this book? And they were the first gen 5. I teach my reader how to build savings so that they know the importance of an emergency fund and that they have savings set aside when something bad happens, because life is going to happen. And like money doesn't solve all problems, but it definitely helps in some ways, lessen the pain. I also teach the basics of budgeting and how important it is to have a spending plan, because if you're not intentional with your money, it's going to come in and out. So once you have clear goals on what you want your money to do for you and you execute a budget, you're then able to achieve those financial goals. The third pillar is having a debt repayment plan. A lot of people are very passive with debt. They're just kind of like, oh, as long as I make the minimum payment and I'm pay on time, I'm good. But you should actually be a lot more aggressive with debt and pay more than the minimum payment to actually get out of debt. And I teach my reader how to do that. The fourth pillar is the one that you like, credit building, which is also so important. Yeah, credit building. I actually just was talking with my voice coach. I'm going to narrate the book, the audiobook in May. So we read over the credit chapter, and I shared a story about how I had a family conflict and they took my car away and I needed a car to get to work. And I didn't have any money. I didn't have money to buy a car or for a down payment. But guess what I had? I had good credit. I had good credit. And because I had good credit, I was able to qualify for a $0 down, 0% interest loan. So I teach my reader the importance of credit building through that story. And lastly, investing, the importance of investing. I focus on the stock market because that's what I like to teach. And I focus on those 5 pillars because they're the ones that if you execute all 5 at the same time, they take care of past you, current you, and future you. So past you is any debt that you incurred, right? Current you is savings right now. If something bad happens today, you want to have savings to bail you out right now. And then future you is credit. If you need credit in the future to buy a home, to buy a car, and investing would be also for the future, right? For retirement, so that you don't have to work until the day you die.
I think a part of our savings has gone to our son's education. And so we know how much we're putting towards his education. And I think we know how much money we can be putting aside once he graduates, once he's able to do that. So we can take that same amount and put it into like some form of investing or something. So that for us, that's coming up. And as we get older, I know that's something we need to be like very cognizant about. So we're thinking about the money that we're going to use and the money that's going to be there. But for right now, it has to go to his education. So it's funded. Mm-hmm.
Anjelica, I have a question, and if you feel comfortable answering it, answer it. If not, we can scratch this. But I'm curious to learn: are you also planning for your retirement by putting money aside?
Yes. So the plan is to be putting that money aside. So right now within our company, due to our age, so the way we like projected, right, what we were doing and what we were making wasn't like laying out the way it was supposed to. So what we've invested into the company, we know when it's going to start, we have to start pulling the money to be able to, I know we need to save it, but I think saving and holding on and sitting on to that money, I've seen my mom hold on to a lot of money and it doesn't move. It doesn't accrue any interest. It doesn't get anywhere. And so the idea is that my hope is that we can start saving money. But you tell me what you think. What should I start now?
Yeah. So just to be clear, I'm a financial educator, which means I can't give people financial advice. But what I do is I can educate
I'm going to start taking
you.
notes. I hope you don't mind.
No, please do. I can't give financial advice because I'm not licensed to do that. But what I can do is provide financial education. So I can explain these things and then you can make the choice to understand what's best for you. So first, let's go back to your mother. You mentioned your mother has quite a bit of cash set aside. There is such a thing as having too much cash set aside. So most financial experts recommend you have 3 to 6 months of your living expenses set aside in case of an emergency. That's called your emergency fund. Mm-hmm. After that, if you want more money, let's say you plan to buy a property and you're also saving towards a down payment. Maybe you have a goal of saving $30,000 for a down payment. Then it would make sense to have your emergency fund in cash as well as your down payment because you're going to be using it soon. Mm-hmm. I have had money coaching clients that have had $200,000 in the bank. And while it's great that they're great savers and they have that much money, it's not great that much money is just sitting in cash at a bank. Because like I said, after a certain amount, the cash needs to be put to work so that it grows. Because it just staying in a bank is not growing. In a checking account or even like a small savings account, it's not going to grow and keep up with the rising cost of living. I think inflation at that 4.3 right now. I think I saw it last. Yeah, so it's getting worse. For context, it should be 2%. So it's double what it should be, more than double what it should be. And I told my client and usually when people hoard money like that, it's usually 2 reasons. It can be a lack of education, right? Of not knowing what are their options. How can I put this money to work? So that's when they need to empower themselves with education, right? With a trusted financial advisor that can educate them on their different options. Or sometimes it can come from financial trauma. If you grew up in a home where there was a lot of scarcity, maybe there was food scarcity, maybe you've been unhoused at some point. Sometimes people feel safe by hoarding that money and knowing that it's in the bank. But like I said, you are safe if you have an emergency fund. You are safe if you have other cash for any immediate needs that you need, like to buy a car or to buy to use it for a down payment. But anything beyond that is excessive and it should be put to work so that it grows for you. And for you, the reason I asked about your retirement plans is because what I've also noticed a lot of mothers is that we're so caring about the next generation, right? That we don't want them to struggle like we did. So I have a friend that she has helped her daughter pay for college. She's helping her repay her student loans, but she's not doing anything towards her retirement. And I tell her, that's great and that's very generous of you to support your daughter. But guess what? There are student loans for college and she has her whole life to repay them, where there are no loans for retirement. And you don't have the rest of your life to work. You don't want to work the rest of your life. You're already 45, right? So I've had those discussions with mothers, and it's hard, honestly, to get through. And even my friend is like, well, I love my daughter. And I just help them understand that that's fine. That's where you're choosing to spend your money. But understand that because you're not prioritizing your retirement, when you are older and you can no longer work, guess who's going to have to pay for that? Your daughter, the same person you were trying to protect, right? So you're actually better off letting your daughter handle their own, maybe support in a small way if you can, but focusing on your financial future, especially retirement, so that you're not a burden to your children when you're of retirement age and can no longer work. Because I see that in my family. My grandparents, they retire with no money. They both live in Mexico. So, of course, the financial education, the money wasn't really there. And between the 5 adult children, they're all in their late 50s and 60s, they have to pitch in for expenses. And they aren't doing great themselves, so it really puts a strain on the family dynamic to have these 5. I even pitch in as a nieta. And I do it because I'm very close to my grandmother. But yeah, I just saw my grandmother the other day and I gave her $800, where most people see their grandmother and their grandmother gives them an inheritance when they pass away, or they give them a Christmas gift with a $50 gift card or something. That's not my reality. If anything, it's flipped and it's the other way.
Thank you for that. Honestly and truly, we're very much trying to still sit comfortable with those conversations. And it's difficult because it's honestly, as a first generation, a mom from an immigrant, it's never comfortable to have these conversations. And I want my mom to trust me, so it's hard to push that financial conversation of like, hey, this is what can happen, this is what we can do. But even myself, still understanding that I don't know everything, and that trying to save my mom, or trying to thank you. I think I have a big realization and a big, huge light on like what it is that I need to do. So I'm definitely going to take a lot into this consideration. I'll be waiting for your book for sure.
Yeah.
Holding on to it.
Of course.
Holding on to it. But I want to be very cognizant of your time, Gigi. I want to be very cognizant of what you're doing, because you're doing the great things out here. I hope TikTok doesn't go anywhere anytime soon, so like that you can continue doing what you're doing on there. For sure.
Well, luckily I have other irons in the fire. I have a podcast called Cultura and Cash. I'm also a creator on Instagram and LinkedIn. And I have my website and my email list where I contact my people. I always understood that no one platform could be my home. So I've always been smart and kind of spread myself in different places. But yeah, I really hope TikTok stays, because that's where I got my start. And I love being a TikTok creator and a TikTok user. I actually enjoy it more as a user, because as a creator, it's work. I have to edit videos, find the right sounds. It's a lot. Where as a user, I just get to scroll and laugh at the funny videos or learn something new.
Yeah, I seen that you got a grant from TikTok actually to become a creator. You want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I won a $50,000 grant to fund my dream project. This grant was sponsored by TikTok, Macro, which is a big production company, and Unbelievable, which is Eva Longoria's production company. We had 150 applicants for this grant. I was one of the 10 that was chosen as a winner, and I'm actually proudly the first person to execute their project. So I have a finished project in hand that I can show, Cultura and Cash. And yes, winning that grant was transformative, because it gave me the ability to produce a high quality book. If I hadn't had the funding, the cover wouldn't have been as nice. I wouldn't have had the market to spend the money to spend on a publicist, and all these things matter when promoting a book. So I'm incredibly thankful for that funding, and also the connection to Eva Longoria's production company, Unbelievable, allowed me to access her and get her endorsement for my book.
That is very amazing. Okay, so we're new to a lot of this. What would you tell us if we want to get into the outside of buying the book? So please go buy the book, Cultura and Cash. Go get the book. You got to go get the book. Okay. Outside of getting the book, visiting your website, what can you tell the audience? What can you tell the Latinas right now who are listening to the conversation and they're like, dang, I'm kind of like in the Same, I mean, the same whirlwinds of Angelica. Where can true in true honesty, where can we start?
That's okay. I think first it's important to acknowledge that it's not your fault. This is information that has been gatekept from us, and most of the traditional personal finance pundits historically have been white. So it's been hard for us to see ourselves represented in the money space. I had to learn
Mm-hmm.
from people like Susie Orman, who had this TV show where she talked about money, or
Mm-hmm.
Dave Ramsey. These are all white people. So when I only saw white people talking about money, I always felt like it wasn't for me, because I'm like, well, they're not speaking about my struggles. They're not speaking about
Mm-hmm.
what's on top of mind for me. So I always felt that's for white people. So that's why I'm so glad to take up space and show up with my full Latinidad, with my big curly hair, and share anecdotes of how I've navigated my money with family, because that's the Latino experience, right? Our money is very much tied to our culture, to our family, because we're so family oriented. So first,
Mm-hmm.
again, give yourself some self-compassion for not knowing what you didn't know, but also know that your money isn't going to fix itself. It requires for you to be very intentional, and to be intentional, you have to understand how it works. So you have to learn money the way that you like to receive information. I personally am a book nerd, so that's why I read 50 money books. I couldn't get enough. Some people prefer to listen to podcasts. There's so many amazing podcasts. Yo Quiero Dinero podcast, Her Dinero Matters podcast, where you can listen to conversations of financial experts where they dive into these financial topics and explain them so you can learn. You can take a free financial literacy class like the ones that I used to teach at the YWCA. You can ask your employer to, if you have an employee resource group, to hire a financial educator like myself to come in and teach budgeting 101 or investing 101, so that you can gain that knowledge, but your employer pays for it. But it's very important for you to take ownership of your education, because once you know more about how money works, then you feel empowered to make the choices you need to make to have a more financially abundant life.
Okay. So listen to podcast, read the book, obviously, go to my employer, because they probably have an HR section that they can probably go and
They have a
solicit
budget.
somebody to come in. They got the money to be able to hire somebody to teach me, as opposed to me paying $1,500 to talk to some, because this is expensive.
Yeah.
You're taking your time out of your day to be able to teach these classes.
Yeah, exactly. And, it would be under financial wellness for their employees, because
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, if their employees are struggling with their own finances, they're going to be stressed out at work, and they're not going to be productive employees. So it makes sense for companies, and I get hired by these companies to come and speak to their employees about financial wellness, typically around Financial Literacy Month, which is next month in April, or Hispanic Heritage Month, which is in September. So those are usually times when there are upticks, but financial education is important all year round. But that's typically when those budgets are being used around those times.
Yeah, I think financial literacy definitely, especially within us, because how many times do we not know that some families just, fighting over land, I don't know where, and they stop talking to each other, and
Los
like
terrenos.
yes, it becomes a big old conversation, and even here, like it blows my mind that you let your brother borrow like so amount of money, and he didn't pay it back, or you thought he did, and nobody took notes, nobody took like little notitas, and like, no, you still owe me like $3,000, where and you completely stop talking to them, right? And not that that's there anything wrong with that, but what I'm saying is we're very much tied into money. Because there's no way out of it. There's no way for us to sustain or live without the money. So why not become educated about it?
Yeah, and take charge. And once you take
Mhm.
charge, you're going to say, wow, why didn't I do this sooner? I have not met one single person that says, I wish I would have taken charge of my financial journey later. Everybody's like, I wish I would have done it sooner.
Because the way you put it, they're easy steps.
Mm-hmm.
They're quick.
Mm-hmm.
Just learning about it, just knowing what your possibilities, as soon as it comes up, you're like, I got the money, I can do that.
Yeah.
Or you look forward to it, and you're like, you know what, in 2 years, if I set aside $100 every month, I might be able to do that.
Exactly.
So,
My big motivator was taking a year off from my corporate job to travel the world. I really wanted to travel the world and go on a sabbatical while I was young. And that goal helped me pay off $20,000 in debt and save $30,000 in savings in about 2.5 years. And this is on a $70,000 salary. So I wasn't making a whole ton of money, but what I did do is I moved from very expensive San Diego to Phoenix, where the cost of living was much cheaper. I became frugal and I changed my spending habits. And I also learned how to advocate for myself in the workplace and increase my pay so that I had more money to play with.
You know,
You're going to love the book.
You're
going to love the book.
Day with you, Gigi, and just talk about these things, because I'm in a place in life where I knew I needed to like focus on that. But honestly, sometimes when my husband, he's a journalist by trade, right? And so he was making like, I don't know how many pennies on the word, right? And so we've gone, as somebody from a collective family of 3, going from like a $40,000, $30,000 a year budget, right? We all we were doing was just getting by and trying to figure out what were we going to do, how we were going to sustain, can we pay this bill, can we do this, can we do that, and now like having this conversation, what a long road to take to be here, to be like, oh, I have the possibility to be able to invest.
Mm-hmm.
How?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, taking ownership of that, right? Not just your downfalls, and accepting that money is a conversation, and yes, be graceful with yourself, but also take charge that, hey, you have the possibility, you have an opportunity to be able to not be afraid of turning 50, 55 and your arms hurting for typing and, all the things, and
carpal tunnel.
Wanting to be able to retire a little bit early and really do what you want to do, without being so solidified to like, well, it has to make money. It has to make money. Yeah. That your money can make money for you, right?
Exactly.
That's what you said earlier.
That's the goal. Yeah, the goal is to build an investment portfolio that pays you to replace your salary. So you no longer have to show up to go to work and your living expenses are still covered. So again, you can do that through the stock market, or if you build a big enough real estate portfolio where your properties are paying you enough in rent, where those cover your living expenses and you don't have to show up to work anymore. You can if you want to, or you can change industries to do something that's low paying that you love. You can do whatever you want. Right. But you have that option once you have taken the time to invest in your future.
Yeah, I thought so. Once upon a time, I used to think that I used to have to live like in a $5 million home for me to be able to do that.
Not at all.
Not true.
No.
That's not true at all. Oh my goodness. Jesus heavens. Okay, bueno. How can we find you? How can the audience find you? Where can we find you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So the best place to learn all about me is on my website, culturaandcash.com. That will have a lot of information about the book, as to links where you can buy. The book is available on all major online retailers like Barnes & Noble, Amazon, bookshop.org. Although I do request, if possible, for you to support your local Latina or BIPOC-owned bookstore. They can request it if you ask them for it, and they will have it in stock for you, and that way you can support small business. You can also access the first full chapter of the book for free by visiting culturaandcash.com, and that's available in PDF or in audio format if you prefer to listen to it. And I'm also active on TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn. My TikTok handle is the First Gen Mentor. All my handles are all linked on that same website, Cultura and Cash. And the last thing is, I recently launched a podcast also called Cultura and Cash. It's an extension of the book. So I talk about money, career, and the publishing process. It's a little bit of everything. But yeah, you can listen to that wherever you listen to podcasts.
Awesome, Gigi. Muchas gracias. Thank you for coming on here. Gracias.
What did you think of the conversation? If you enjoyed what you heard, let us know in the comments. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you for listening to the Latina Leadership Podcast, and we will see you next time.